But if they want to become truly advanced disciples of Sat Yoga, we do ask that. Because you're not a real yogi until you have taken those vows. And not because somebody told you you had to, but because you realize that's the only way to live. It's the only way to be in happiness. Otherwise your life is chaotic, cluttered with diversions that keep the ego mind going and keep the bliss repressed. And so everyone has two choices: ego or bliss. Ego is suffering, dukkha. Ego is misery. The ego is always in lack. Why? Because the ego is an illusion that is alienated from the blissful self. It's lost touch with it. And it's just a mass of thoughts that create anxiety and create depression and create all kinds of fears and all kinds of concerns that externalize your intellect and make you think that your happiness lies in outer objects, in the possession of objects, and even people as objects. And of course it never does. And it leads to constant disappointment. But yogis know that happiness is not out there. Happiness is the self. The self, when it's not obscured by the ego mind and its illusions, fantasies, chatters, desires, fears. When all of that is silenced, there's liberation, there's freedom. And who doesn't want to live in freedom? Who doesn't want to live in bliss? Yoga is bliss. That's the real meaning of yoga. It's called union, right? We all know that the word in Sanskrit is union, but it is union of this conscious ego self with the Supreme Self. In fact, absorption in, the disappearance of the ego self into the infinite, absolute self. The relative self dissolves, the absolute self is revealed. And so it's not really even a union, because the relative self was always an illusion. And even at this moment, at every moment, you are the Supreme Self. There's nothing else. Brahman is one without a second. All of this, all of nature, all of the universe is the expression and manifestation of Brahman. We are in it now. We are swimming in an ocean of bliss. And when your ego mind stops the barrier between you and that ocean of joy, you'll be in it. You'll be vibrating with it. That's the miracle of yoga. You can reach it just by knowing that and being willing to silence the mind that obstructs your true nature. All very simple. But by the time of Patanjali already, who was reforming yoga, the original we call Adi Sat Yoga didn't even have any steps. It wasn't Ashtanga. It was one step directly to bliss. Thou art that, right? That's the mantra. Shivoham, we are that. And people used to have a clear enough, sattvic enough intellect that they could hear that, they could grok it, and they'd be in bliss. No sadhana necessary. Those were the days. Now it's a struggle. The ego mind has got us. But it's an illusion that it's got us. It's just that the mind convinces us that it's got us. It tells us it's got us. And we believe it. Don't believe it. Believe the silence. But you have to reach the silence to believe the silence. So Patanjali said, okay, let's go through some steps. First you sit. You have the asana. Then you start the pranayama. And again, for Patanjali, it wasn't pranayamas. It wasn't this whole elaborate science that has developed in recent years, thanks to Iyengar and others, who have used it for very good purposes, for physical well-being. He cured his body of tremendous illnesses through pranayama and asana. But all pranayama really means is slow down your breathing, because the breathing and thoughts are connected. As you slow down the breathing, you slow down the metabolism. And the mind begins to calm down and a state of serenity is reached on a bodily level. Pranayama will bring you to the point of serenity where you're actually able to sit to meditate. Then you begin the inner steps of the Ashtanga. The inner steps, pratyahara, dharana, and dhyana. Pratyahara just means you stop looking out there, you turn your mind inward. You withdraw from the sensual world. You withdraw from the outer illusion of reality, the phenomenal plane, and you begin to ask yourself, who is the observer of that world? You begin to focus, instead of on the body, on the consciousness. First you reach the level of mind. There will still be thoughts. Then you get the next step, the dharana. The dharana means you link with the source of thoughts so that the thoughts begin to come to a halt. And when you are able to then control the emanation of thought and establish yourself there, now you're in dhyana. Now you're really ready. You've controlled the thoughts. But there's still effort in dhyana. Who's controlling the thoughts? There's still a conscious will that's separate from that oceanic bliss. But it was this form of yoga that starts with dhyana that spread through the world. The asanas and pranayamas were left behind. The dhyana spread eastward. It became chan, dhyan, chan, same word in Chinese. Chan in Japanese is Zen. It's all yoga, but they just started with the dhyana and samadhi. They didn't need the anterior steps. Just go straight for the marrow of the work. And they became great spiritual yogic traditions. So there's not only Hindu yoga, there's Buddhist yoga. It went to China and became Taoist yoga. And it came west. Christ was a great yogi. In fact, he said, "My yoga's easy." They translate it as "my yoke is easy," but we know yoke and yoga are the same word, and they didn't dare say yoga. But of course he was saying my yoga is easy, probably because there were no asanas involved. But my yoga is easy. It's the same thing. What is his yoga? I and the Father are one. Punto. That's Christianity. And the Father is Brahman, Shiva, the Supreme Self, that you are. Then the religions took it out of the sphere of the psychological realization and made it a myth and put God out there in some celestial realm somewhere, made him an old man on a cloud. And, well, how do you have union with that, right? So religion is yoga. The word means yoga, too. It reunion, right? Religare. We know that. The religions are yogas, but they're yogas with all the baggage of creeds and belief systems and all of that take away the real meaning of it. And then there's only a few esoteric mystics in those Christian, Jewish, and Islamic traditions. They're great mystics. They're beautiful. And the same knowledge, the same yoga is there in all of those religious traditions at the esoteric level. But at the Sunday school level, it's a lost cause. And so the whole world is filled with yogis, but most of the yogis don't know they're yogis, and they don't practice it accurately and directly. They practice it via a belief system and prayer and other kinds of processes. Not that those are bad. If your prayer is sincere, it will take you to the self eventually. But if you have the belief that you're a body, a bodily being, you will not be able to get to the highest vibrational frequencies of consciousness. And that is why the yogic teachings say you're not the body, you're the Atman. The Atman is the equivalent of the Holy Spirit in Christianity. The Atman is bodiless, formless.